asking if the benefit system is unfair. It's 0207 862 2222. That's the number you need. That's what Keir Starmer has reportedly told Labour MPs last night amid threats of a revolt over more than £6 billion in planned welfare cuts. He apparently said the current system gives the worst of both worlds, with people both discouraged from working whilst costs are spiralling. 2.8 million people are neither working or looking for a job as a result of long-term sickness. Last year, the government spent £65 billion on sickness benefits, and it's people claiming help for disabilities that are set to face the toughest cuts, with plans to freeze the rate of personal independence payments, PIP, and make it harder to claim. Now, I'm going to go to you, Esther, just so we're clear at what we're talking about. As of January, 9.3 million people aged 16 to 64 in the UK were economically inactive. That's a rise of 713,000 since the pandemic. That's one number for us to consider. The other one is this. We talk about PIP. £5 billion in savings by making it harder to qualify for the personal independence payment. That's a benefit that's not linked to work, just to be clear. It's meant to help people with additional costs for their disabilities. Further savings by freezing PIP are going to be next year, so they're not going to rise with inflation. So PIP is worth between about £1,500 and close to £10,000 a year, depending on the assessed level of disability. Now, it looks like the Labour Party are in revolt, saying this is inhumane, is it?
I think that the revolt is mainly coming from the personal independence payments more so than the former that you mentioned. I think on the former, it's hard to disagree because you have to look at who he's talking about when he's talking about sickness or sickness benefits. So of the 713,000 that have claimed sickness benefits since COVID in that increase, most of them are between the ages of 16 and 35. Most of them are not in any long-term education or looking for work. And so you have to ask, how did Britain get to the point where it just gave up on its young people and allowed them to be on sickness benefits indefinitely, not having to look for a job, the vast majority of whom are claiming for anxiety and depression? And I've spoken
Do you know that to be the case?
That is the truth. Many of them are claiming for anxiety and depression. It's not for physical permanent disabilities.
You said most of them. Is that right?
Most of them. Most of that 713,000 are under the age of 35. And most of that group, the 16 to 35, are claiming for things like anxiety and depression. And what you have to look at, who is this disadvantaging? Well, it's actually disadvantaging people with real disabilities that cannot, under most circumstances, go to work. So I'm talking about people with physical disabilities. They can't walk. They have permanent spinal injuries, stuff to do, injuries that they've picked up from work, for example. They're saying they're at the back of the queue now because the system has become so bloated and swollen and the administration can't deal with it, that you have people that physically cannot actually work that are now being pushed to the back of the queue for a young person that, of course, yes, anxiety and depression is very serious, but really the answer isn't to allow them to be on sickness benefits indefinitely. Now, the reason why I suspect this is going to draw a lot of ire is because, you know, when the Tories say it, it looks like they're stigmatising people on sickness benefits. But now that Labour is saying it, it's just like, you know, they've just betrayed the rest of the country. But you want benefits to go to the people that need it the most. And if we have a system, which we currently do, that's unsustainable, that costs too much, that's allowing many young people who should be in work to not work, I don't know how you can justify it. Now, on the PIP, I don't necessarily agree with it because I think there are better places to make cuts than people who can't actually...
Well, let's talk about people who might be in work. You know, in a letter to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, a dozen charities, Jemma, have argued that there's little evidence to suggest that cutting benefits increases employer outcomes. Yeah. Is this just a case of punching down for politics by Keir?
I think so. I feel like this isn't a Labour Party, in my view. This is Tories 2.0. And actually, some of these suggested cuts are more vicious than the ones that George Osborne implemented. And what I think is, if you look at why you've got more socially, more people who are inactive in terms of employment, perhaps it's as a result of the previous iteration of austerity that we had. You take out Sure Start centres, you take out youth centres, you take out some of the things that cradle people and help people and give them a good quality of life, and then you end up here and don't do it all over again. And I think this is really wrong on so many levels. It's very savage. Also, it's going to really split the party. It really is. There's a lot of disquiet. And it's very interesting because you could say that arguably one of the most productive sources of expenditure is the dole, or whatever you call it now, universal credit, because you're only getting £200 and it's spent. It goes back into the economy. And why, when you could put, as the patriotic millionaires have advocated for, you could put a 2% tax on £10 million worth of accumulated wealth, and you could get 24
Well, one of the
billion.
things that they're suggesting in this package, you bring up universal credit, is that the basic rate for universal credit paid to those searching for work or in work will go up, whilst cutting the rate for those who are judged as unfit
It's
for work.
absolutely disgraceful. And I know that disabled people are absolutely freaking out on social media. You don't have to look very far. They're feeling really at threat. This goes with a backdrop of the assisted dying bill that much of that proportion of vulnerable people feel very nervous about. And the idea that a PIP payment, you have to go through about 70 forms, you have to be checked out, and you are certainly ill or disabled. So the idea that now Labour are saying, well, we need more competent checking and we're going to go, are you saying that the people who did the checks in the first place are incompetent?
How do you get young people back into work?
Well, there are loads of conversations around that, and one of them is to remove the option of not working, i.e. if you don't work, you really can't survive. And I think that's one thing. I do think you raised an important point about employment opportunities for disabled people. And this is often one of those cases of, let's look at which countries do it better. And I would say France is one of those countries. So France has a system where actually companies pay a tax into a system that helps to find better employment for disabled people. Here in the UK, we have sort of reasonable adjustments.
But some people might say, Esther, I mean, you're surprisingly veering to the left today.
Well, I mean, but it's
what's going on with you?
Because the left has gone right. The
Well,
left has gone right.
It's not about that.
You won't live in France if you were going to be taxed there, I would have thought. Betty, you're in Glasgow. What do you make of all of this? Is this the government kind of punching down, or is it absolutely necessary to deal with people who are playing hooky?
Well, it's like everything else that's been going on for years and years and years. But Ed Balls was questioning the minister this morning about the severely sick, the disabled,
Right.
which my daughter is sick, and I've got a grandson who's severely disabled with autistic. He says, no, can't look at you or anything. Very, it's panic attacks and everything. And a friend of mine who's very ill, who's been very ill, 3 stents in his heart, stoma, taken away at death's door.
And is it hard for them, Betty? Is it hard for them to claim the benefits that they need? They obviously can't.
No, not now. But, well, it was for my friend because under the Tories. In fact, it was the Tory MP Margaret Mitchell up here in Scotland that was horrified at what they were putting my friend through, and she got this sorted for him because it was terrible. But Keir Starmer is a disgrace because he's going to, it doesn't matter how ill you are. Ed Balls kept asking that question this morning and this minister would not answer.
Betty, and we're going to carry on with this a little bit, but you have to say a lot of people from the various disabled communities, are making similar noises, to say the least. Bianca, you're in Kent. What do you think?
I sort of think the opposite, actually, to the previous lady.
Yeah.
I'm on the highest amount of ESA because of sickness reasons, and I'm on the highest amount of PIP. So after my rent's paid, I get £1,900 a month, which I've got one daughter who's 8, and I think it's too much. And I actually feel guilty that I get that amount. And I look at my sister and her partner who work, and they literally really struggle through.
Bianca, can I just say thank you for your honesty there? I mean, there'll be some people, I saw people in the studio you can't see, many of whom are not on great wages, open their mouths at that moment, £1,900. Some people might ask, well, Bianca, if you don't need the money, why not give it back or share it?
Well, because you can't give it back. You can't give it back.
I don't think many people want to.
I mean, the thing is, I've had mental issues from the age of 15. I'm now 49.
I hear you.
And basically, I was sort of given up on by the age of about 26 and told that there was nothing else they could do for me.
So, Bianca, just a very quick question before I've got to go to the break. It's interesting to hear from you. Do you think that perhaps the benefits are too generous in many instances, and this is something that Keir Starmer is right to look at?
I don't think that they're going to look at it in the right way. They keep going on about people conning the system. You know, I've been 3 years. I've had one hospital appointment with a bone specialist because my feet are crumbling in my bones.
Well, I'm
I
sorry
would
to hear
rather the money be put into getting me an appointment. I've had one appointment in 3 years.
Well, that's a whole issue for the
money
NHS, and you should definitely call back on another day. But in the meantime, it's very enlightening to hear from you, Bianca. So thanks very much. Quite a surprising call. Now, after the break, we're talking more of this and taking more of your calls. I'm going to go first to Newport and to Brian. Is this punching down, or is this finally something that needed to be dealt with?
No, I think it's Starmer taking an easy option, hitting the easiest targets, when there's other things he should be looking at and sorting out first, i.e. immigration. The net zero thing should be put on hold until he can sort the country out. It just seems he's trying to please lots of people but can't please anybody. And then once you get people off PIP and you put them onto normal benefits, then he's going to say there's too many people on normal benefits. Why not hit the normal benefits first? Why not take a look at the immigration things first and how many
Well, Brian, he
dependents
might say that
then?
he might say in government you can spin more than two plates at once, and this needs to be dealt with, not least because of sobering statistic: 9 million people aged between 16 and 64 in the UK were economically inactive. That's 713,000. That's a rise since the beginning of the pandemic. Thanks for calling, Brian. Carolyn, you're in Dorset. What's your view? Is it time to tackle what effectively Sir Keir Starmer is saying? You know, there's people who are shirking work and we all pay for them, so it's time that this is addressed.
Good morning to you all, first of all. I think it's disgusting. I worked all my younger life and now I have a heart condition. In fact, I've got two different heart conditions. And people look at me and they say, well, there's nothing wrong with her, but they can't see my heart.
So Karen, sorry to interrupt you. It's a hidden disability, as it's sometimes understood as.
That's right, yes. It's a hidden disability. Now, when they're saying about going to cut the benefits, they're hitting the poor people. We don't want to be ill. We don't want to have to rely on benefits. But you know, stop all these immigrants. Stop giving them houses and benefits.
Caroline, I hear you on that. Just focusing on this particular issue. You're someone, hidden disability. There are many people out there that have that, right? And it's very, very difficult, who clearly deserves that benefit. But what would you say to people who, you know, might not necessarily be as deserving as you are? You know, people that perhaps have conditions which, with a little bit of help, might be able to go back into work. Shouldn't the government also be talking to those people and trying to persuade them back? And isn't perhaps cutting the benefits part of that, if you like, thinking about the carrot and the stick? The carrot is the work, but the stick is to say, look, unless you go back to work, we're going to not be able to support people like Carolyn who are so deserving.
Well, I actually, to help, I am a volunteer for a disability group in Blandford Forum. Now, the people that come in and see me are getting very, very worried, as I am.
Right.
But
yeah, it's a hard one.
Lost track of what I was saying.
Can I just to say something to support Caroline's point,
Esther,
because I understand your frustration.
Yeah.
And just to add, you know, people see the government's actions as sort of a hierarchy of their priorities, right? If you want to cut public spending, which is too much, and you don't build a productive economy on welfare dependency, that's true. Most people are right to say, what about asylum reform? What about cutting legal immigration? What about, you know, the bloated civil service? What about healthcare reform?
Well, that is what a lot of people are phoning up to saying. They're saying, look, if you're going to prioritise stuff, prioritise migration, not this.
The winter fuel payments only cut £1.5 billion, but you could save that money by reforming the asylum system, for example.
Well, let's see what Steve from Aberdeen has.
I didn't get my winter fuel payment this year. I turned 66 in July, and this was the first year that I would have been allowed it, but I couldn't have it.
Right, thanks very much for calling, Caroline, and I wish you well, and thank you for the work that you're doing supporting members of the disabled communities in your area. Steve, you're in Aberdeen. What's your view here? Is it people shirking work? And if that's right, isn't it right that Sir Keir Starmer does something about it?
Well, OK, I'm going to be honest about a situation here, Rob.
Yeah.
You have panels here of people. They don't have a Scooby-Doo, OK? And I'll be honest about it. Because I stay in Scotland, what they now do is, for anything that you're doing, e.g. PIP, they don't just take it on the face value of when you attend and potentially fake it for that potential hour. They actually look at your medical records. So if you don't have a build-up of it, they then can question it.
Yeah, just to be clear,
and one thing I will tell you,
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jenna did actually say that.
I said they have to go to rigorous form filling and they go through a whole procedure. Yes. So there's no way.
But
and I said, so therefore, is that incompetence in the first place? I don't think so.
But Steve, do carry on.
Please, because I do have a valid point to make, OK? And that is, I had an incident at work, and as a result of it, went for an assessment on my knee to get my knee replaced. I then had the consultant who I was honest with, and I had told him, and this is where you have people being judgmental on the sidelines, I had said that I would quite happily volunteer to go on the list for assisted suicide because I don't like life and so forth. Now, as a result of that gentleman sticking his neck above the water, I had an emergency appointment at the local mental health hospital yesterday. They're going to reevaluate my medication. Right. They're going to put me forward for psychiatric work.
Steve, forgive me talking over you. I'm going to stop you because I want to say, first of all, you sound like you've been active in getting well, and I'm glad to hear that. And also that the point that you make and have helped us understand is that you don't just get benefits easily, especially in Scotland. The point is that you have to go through vigorous tests, and people do look into the background. And Steve, because we've got a lot of callers today, I want to say thank you for calling. I wish you well going forward in every sense. And I hope that you get all of the continued treatment you need and all of the economic help that you need and clearly deserve, Steve. Kathy, you're in Surrey. Kathy?
Yes.
Now, I can't hear you there. Just very quickly, do you think it's time that Sir Keir address this, or is he just sort of punching down low-hanging fruit?
I think two things. I was widowed last year, and I received automatically a widow's pension. Lovely. Thank you very much. I don't need it, but I have it. Thank you. I have since remarried, but I still get a widow's pension. That is ridiculous. There is no way that I can actually.
So you think? Forgive me, I don't sound rude when I interrupt people, but sadly we don't have all the time we need. You're saying that benefits are too generous, in effect.
Well, I'm saying that they're not sufficiently targeted. There must be a way when you fill in forms to say you've got married and it all goes through the so-called government. Those benefits should be stopped. Secondly, I had a stroke a couple of years ago and I'm partially sighted. But I'm sitting in my chair, I'm perfectly fluent, and I'm perfectly compos mentis. Everybody talks about working from home. There's no reason why, should I wish to or need to, I couldn't work from home.
Well, you certainly sound that way, Kathy, and thank you for calling in, not least because, you make a point, which is to say, I'm getting a little bit too much more. I'm getting too much money. And frankly, the benefit system does need to be reconsidered. Lots of people calling on both sides of the argument here. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for all your calls on this.